Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, The Answer Company. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center and Medi-Spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. The Minnesota Twins are looking forward to another great season in 2023, led by the return of All-Stars Carlos Correa and Brian Buxton. With the return of numerous players who were injured in 2022 and some new acquisitions, another division crown and a return to the World Series are in their sights. Established in 2007, 45th Parallel Spirits was among the first 50 micro-distilleries in the United States. Based in New Richmond, Wisconsin, all aspects of production occur at our facility. If you're interested in visiting and learning more about the 45th Parallel Distillery, please check our website and plan a visit to tour our facility and taste our spirits. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org.
Welcome to this edition, or today's edition of Access to Democracy. Today we have a very special guest, Jill Weidemann-West, the CEO of People Incorporated. And this is very important to note that People Incorporated is the largest nonprofit provider of health care in the state of Minnesota. We are in the midst of what many identified as a mental health crisis, and you are doing things that help us deal with that. So part of the purpose of today's session is for you to explain what People Incorporated is and to let people know that there is a beacon of hope and help out there for both those suffering from mental illness and those who love and care for people who are suffering from mental illness. But let's start, Jill. Who are you? And give us a little bit of your background.
Well, thank you for inviting me today. I so appreciate the opportunity to chat with you for a bit. Let me tell you about People Incorporated. It's about a 54-year-old organization.
You're going to tell us about People Incorporated when I ask you to tell us about...
You want me to tell you about
we'll
me?
get to you later. Tell us about People Incorporated.
Well, you know, People Incorporated is about a 54-year-old organization. We have been around a long time and started in a very humble way. And that humble way was, in the case of how it started, a pastor noticing individuals that were standing outside of his church every day that didn't really seem to have a place to go, seemed to be struggling in a lot of different ways. And he said, I think I need to do something about that. And he invited them in for coffee and cookies and realized that many of them were veterans. Many of them had a lot of mental health and chemical health issues, and said, gosh, there needs to be a way for these folks to get the help they need and then be incorporated back into society in a fruitful and wonderful and joyful way. And that's how we started, and that's what we're still doing.
Do you have the name of that minister?
I do. His name was Reverend Harry Mahakian.
And so she is the one that started that?
Harry Mahakian started the program years ago. He ultimately, when he saw the need in St. Paul, which is where it all began, when he saw the need, he actually brought in a number of faith leaders and said, have you noticed the need that we have in our community? And they said yes. And so ultimately, People Incorporated was built by Harry Mahakian and a number of other individuals that came together to say, let's do something good here.
You know, this is so much an American story, because often initiative for things like this, programs like do come from the faith community, people that care about the broader society and want to do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think one of the things that's so beautiful about People Incorporated is we're much bigger than the day that Harry walked out of his church and said, hey, you guys want to come in and have coffee? I mean, we're a much bigger, more complex organization. We're a bigger and more complex society, but we're still doing that ground sort of level work of acknowledging that there's a lot of folks out there that are suffering and need, and they need answers, they need care, and they need options, and that's what we're about, is creating that path.
Now, we hear the term frequently that we're in a mental health crisis, and we've been there for a while. Are we?
You know, I think it depends on which part of it you look at. I mean, we're, you know, from a logistics standpoint, we're in a mental health crisis because we don't have workforce that supports a lot of our healthcare entities, but certainly behavioral health care, mental health care is an area where we're just not graduating people fast enough for the demand. But if you look at just pure mental health and you say, gosh, are we less healthy than we were years ago? I don't know. I can't compare it, but what I can tell you is that the last 3 years in particular have really changed the way people see their mental health. I can remember talking to folks back in 2017 and 16, and they'd say, oh, you know, I love what you guys do, but I don't really know anybody who has mental health issues, and nobody in my family has mental health issues. And you know, being confined to your homes and the manageability of all of that, and kids being homeschooled while we were in the midst of a worldwide pandemic, you know, trying to make sense of a very divided, challenging environment, politically, socially, all of these things. There's very few people out there, I think, that would say they didn't have mental health.
So one of the changes is there's a greater awareness and understanding of mental health issues.
100%. I think this is a hard time for mental health because I think there's tremendous need and tremendous unmet need, but I think it's a wonderful time because we're all talking about it finally.
Okay. So you took over as CEO of People Incorporated in 2014. And before that, you were Chief Operating Officer in 2010. Have you grown since you took over People Incorporated?
Oh, we've absolutely grown. I really I believe that the ingenuity and the capacity for charitable thinking grew out of the days of Harry Mahaki, and it continues to really drive our organization. So where we see need, we try to lean in and figure out what we can do about that.
So how have you changed as an organization and provider of services since 2014?
Well, I would say one of the ways that we've changed is as an organization, we are very in touch with our community and community wellness. And so we're far more likely to ask for forgiveness than permission to do something that we believe is going to really benefit the community.
So you're kind of aggressive in how you provide services. I mean, you said you ask for forgiveness instead of permission. You see a need and you try to address it.
We try to find a way to meet that need. And I don't know if I would say it's aggressive. I would say it is impactful. I believe that as a nonprofit in Minnesota, doing what we do, working with individuals that are largely have multiple barriers to care, our job is to make sure that we're impacting those citizens, and I kind of lead with that.
So, but here's another issue that is important in the mental health area. It really can be defined by one word, which is access. What are you doing to improve access so that people actually, now they're seeing the need, but you're trying to communicate, that's kind of what we're doing here today, but how do they implement access?
Well, I mean, one of the big things that we're doing with access that I think is just super important is we're creating partnerships all over the place. And what I mean by that is, where are clients showing up? that need mental health services, but perhaps where they're showing up doesn't provide those services. So, for instance, we're looking at the homeless population and understanding that there might be a number of places that support maybe overnight stays and getting out of cold weather and maybe even some warm food and all of those things. But for many of these folks, they have mental health issues that really need to be addressed in order for them to be able to move hopefully past homelessness and into something better. And I think that's where we come in and we say, okay, homeless shelters, homeless entities, how can we help with the services that we have, the folks that you're serving?
So what are some of the services that you put in place and implemented? Now you partner and you now are doing a better job of identifying the long-term issue. What are the services that you provide to deal with these issues?
Well, there's a number of things. One of the things that we do an awful lot of is what I would call treatment. So treatment can come in a couple of different ways. Treatment can come in the form of an outpatient exchange, or it can come in the form of a residential, or more of a residential service. We provide both of those services.
So you even provide residences for people who are suffering?
We do. We have 9 programs in the metro area that provide both crisis stabilization services and also provide treatment services, for individuals in need.
So this is an important change in the model. So, crisis, you deal with somebody in crisis for a week or 10 days, but then that's over. And there's always seemed to be that need is that, it's like throwing them back out into the world. You're trying to provide something post-crisis?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we did for a number of years was we started to track the number of individuals that were coming to us for crisis services. Average length of stay is around 5 days. And we would look at how many of them we referred to other services like treatment, and then actually how many of them made it to that next service. And we realized that we were seeing the same folks over and over again because they were never making it to the next step. So one of the things we did a couple years ago is we took some of our programs and made them hybrid programs. So we have crisis beds there and we have treatment beds. And if you are in fact someone who is recommended for treatment, instead of having to leave, go to a different facility, wait until that facility has a bed for you, we just walk you to a different group room and you stay in the same place. This is very important for individuals that are struggling with mental health crisis. They need that continuity.
So this is probably a transition point to another service. I think what it's called is harm reduction model. What is a harm reduction model?
Well, I think when people talk about harm reduction, what they think about is methadone for heroin addicts, where they don't feel the pain of coming off of heroin, but they also get methadone that doesn't give them the high or whatever. And people tend to think of harm reduction that way. Harm reduction is really much bigger than that. Harm reduction is about reducing the harm that chemicals play in a person's life. And it is considered a best practice with individuals that have mental health issues.
So you're dealing with people who have chemical dependencies and mental health.
Correct.
That's a dangerous, tough combination.
Not uncommon. It's probably the vast majority of individuals. And if you think about it, it makes kind of some sense, right? If you're suffering from something, you look for ways to manage that yourself, and it is not uncommon that people with mental illness will try to self-manage with chemicals, alcohol, for instance.
So how do you deal with this model? Is it, do you lecture people and tell them to do a cold dropping of the chemical dependency? No, what's the model do?
Well, what we do here in the state of Minnesota, and I say that broadly, it's not just a people incorporated thing. The state of Minnesota is very committed to a client-centered model of care. And what we do is we sit down with the clients and we give them tools to create a tool belt of sorts that help them to understand the things that they're doing that are going to make their mental health and their chemical health issues worse, and the things that are going to make it better. And we teach them how to use those tools so that once they're discharged from care, maybe they aren't self-medicating depression anymore with alcohol. Maybe now they are actually on medication that helps to manage their depression. And then they've also got tools so that when they find themselves in a situation where they're thinking perhaps about using or thinking about using a chemical, that maybe they think, well, you know, I know that this actually makes this what I suffer with worse, so maybe I won't do it, or maybe I'll use a tool.
Is this all pie in the sky, or is it working?
No, I think it works. I wouldn't be here if I didn't think it works. Now, I'm not going to say that it's easy and that everybody grabs a hold of it on their first try and runs it down. I mean, individuals that live with significant mental health concerns and chemical health concerns have a lot of work that they've got to do with a lot of support over a long period of time.
And you provide them with the support and an environment that can ratchet up the possibility of success?
Absolutely. And to your question about what else we do, once they discharge from some of those residential facilities, you've got, you know, a doctor that they can see for medication if that's what they need. They can see a therapist. We have a number of what we call mobile workforce, or workforce that will go to them either in their home or, you know, meet them at, you know, a coffee shop or whatever, to talk about everything from ways that we can help or things that they're struggling with to actually helping them find other resources.
So one of the things I noticed, I've gone to your gala or fundraiser, and you have an art show there, and it's the artwork done by your clients. What does that do? What is that about?
So, you know, it's an interesting thing. If you know someone who has struggled with mental health, what you know is it can be an incredibly isolating disease. And oftentimes people have a hard time articulating how they feel or what they're feeling, you know, in a verbal way. But what we do know is that complementary therapies like, you know, writing, creating artwork, creating collages, that these complementary therapies can help an individual struggling with that isolation of mental illness or chemical health issues find a voice for where it is that they're at, and use that voice through a painting or writing something in a journal that actually helps them to get a little bit closer touch with what their struggles really are.
So I've been to some of these galas, and you've had some of the people, I've seen the artwork, I've seen the writing, and you've had some of the people who have done the writing share their writing. And I mean, it's exhilarating to see the satisfaction and the just the positive attitude that they come across when they do this.
That's where you see that recovery is possible. Now, recovery is one of those words that means something different to everyone. So we don't have a definition of recovery. Recovery for you might be different than the recovery for me. But when you see the artwork, when you see someone getting housing, when you see someone reading something at an event that is exhilarating, what you're seeing is recovery. You're seeing people using tools that help them to help themselves.
I want to talk about another initiative of yours. Again, you know, I was in the law, whatever, but this was a police social worker initiative that, I mean, so many of the people that come into the criminal justice system have a mental issue. So what did you do in this area?
Well, this was an area actually where, you know, we were looking at the number of sort of 911 type calls, if you will, that were coming into, in this particular case, when we started at the St. Paul Police Department, that were mental health related. And we were also looking at, they were also looking specifically at the number of those folks that were not only calling in, but were calling in consistently, like more often. And what we really tried to do is create a way of us going out on these calls with police officers. The police officers can make sure that the environment is safe, but instead of putting someone in the back of the car and taking them to the emergency room or taking them to jail, depending on what the circumstances are, it gave us the opportunity to have a social worker go into a safe environment and really try to de-escalate the client and figure out what it is that they needed to be more successful in managing their mental health symptoms in the future, and then work with them longer term to get those needs met.
Is this program working?
I believe it is. I mean, we've been doing it with St. Paul for 6 years now.
Any other police?
We're in White Bear Lake. We were in Anoka, up in Coon Rapids, and Blaine for a while, but they actually brought theirs in-house, and we get calls every day from police departments saying, "Come help us."
Now, my background is in the law, a judge, a justice, and one thing that struck me is that how many people in our system who are incarcerated have mental health issues. I would say that 25 to 30% of the people in our prisons have serious mental health issues, and the number who have some other type of mental health are you doing anything with them?
We are. I am really happy to say that right in the midst of COVID and what we were all going through in 2020, SAMHSA took a number of grants off the shelf, and we're looking for ways to impact the community. And we had been doing some work with the police, and we were seeing that our sort of our jails and our prisons are our new sort of mental health institutions. And so we actually put in a request to do that work in the jails. And we got the grant. It was a multi-year grant, and it's also been renewed for another multi-year grant. And it has us providing services for identified individuals in the jail system that are identified as having mental health issues, and being able to go in and work with them prior to sentencing, prior to their release from jail, and get them in the system.
So you're actually going into the jails and the prisons.
Yep.
Now we're getting close to the end. And you know and I know that my wife Jan and I had a daughter who suffered from mental illness. Right. And we loved her dearly. She had probably the best sense of justice of anybody I know. But she suffered badly from mental illness. And I got to say, I mean, education level, everything else. Jan and I were probably among the upper group that could deal with this, but it was frustrating to us. What life raft or boy can you send out to parents and that say there is help available?
You know, we are really quite fortunate in Minnesota because we do have a very robust mental health system. And there are a lot of resources. It's mostly that people don't know where to begin, right? You know, but one of the things
or they sometimes run into a dead end.
Yes, absolutely. What I can tell you is that there are a number of groups just like us in Minnesota that are a resource. You call them, they can at least give you the resources. Your counties are all resources. All counties have a community mental health entity within their county services, and those are resources. And if all else fails, you call People Incorporated. We have a central access line. We take thousands of calls a month. Some of those people end up in our services, and some of those people we give resources to, and they end up somewhere else. But you've just got to keep picking up the phone. You've got to keep talking to people, and you've got to find that person that's going to link arms with you and help you out.
Okay, you touched on something. So what you're telling people, there are resources there, but they need to be aggressive advocates? Mm-hmm.
That's true for all of us, right?
What?
We have to be aggressive advocates for ourselves. I mean, that is important. If you are a family member and you have someone who is suffering, you know from your own experience, you would move mountains to help, right?
Yes, but we weren't shown where the mountains were.
Yeah, I think that the big thing is really just not giving up, but resourcing in a lot of different places. So a lot of times people start with a resource around government services. And sometimes government services can be Johnny on the spot and right there for you. Other times it can be kind of a web. If you're not getting your needs met there, then you know what? You go online and you say, mental health agencies near me, and you just start calling people. And you make sure that you find that person that can help you advocate for what you need.
Say, now, often people are dealing with mental health, they come in contact and have to deal face-to-face with the issue. When they come in contact with the court system, do our court systems do a decent job with this?
Well, you know, I think there's room for improvement for all of us all the time, and I don't think that's any different for the court systems. What I will say is that having lived in other states myself and been, you know, more aware of what's going on in other states, Minnesota's making a big effort in the court systems to try to understand better ways to deal with chemical health and mental health. But, you know, there's always room.
So it's a work in progress is what you said.
Everything is.
I know that from, so we're down to our last minute. Are there any pearls of wisdom and advice you have for those who need to get help?
You know, if you need help, it's hard because, again, it can feel really isolating, but you must reach out. The isolation turns inward and it becomes more and more dangerous for individuals suffering with mental health conditions. And as hard as it is, if you're a loved one, call it out.
Yeah, I know that. I mean, I remember sitting across the table from my wife, and she and I were the only ones we felt that were experiencing it. And you're telling us is that there's help out there and we need to reach out. Absolutely. You're not in, you know, there's a lot of folks out there that are struggling, that have loved ones that are struggling. If your loved one can't reach out for themselves because of their isolation and their disease, then you know what, you need to really work hard to reach out for them because there are resources there. Thank you for telling us. I hope that this has helped some people deal with the issues in this very, very difficult area. Jill Weidemann-West, CEO of People Incorporated, the premier nonprofit provider of mental health services in the state of Minnesota. Thank you so much for what you do. Thank you. I appreciate it.